Hay is the driest crop cultivated in the Southwest. Will alfalfa producers be unable to make a living as a result of the drought? Agriculture, particularly alfalfa, consumes around 80% of the Colorado River's declining water supply, prompting calls for more water conservation. We will need to conduct additional research to determine whether the drought will cause an imbalance in the alfalfa market. Stay tuned for more information on this topic. Without further ado, let's dive into an overview of alfalfa farmers' case on the mega drought to give up their crop. In the early morning of August in California's Imperial Valley, tractors roar across verdant alfalfa fields, mowing down the tall grass and leaving it to dry in shaggy piles under the blazing sun. The fodder crop holds the highest importance in one of the oldest farming communities in the Colorado River Basin. In the valley, 1 of every 3 acres used for farming is devoted to the cultivation of alfalfa, which, once dried, produces hay that is rich in protein and is typically fed to cattle. The plant towers over the desert Southwest, not just because it is the region's greatest crop, but also because it is one of the thirstiest. Its deep roots suck up water in a region that has been burned by drought for 22 years. This gives the plant an advantage over other plants in the area. The Imperial Valley is the single largest controller of Colorado River water rights, which enables it to sustain large-scale alfalfa production, even during a mega drought. As a result of the basin being on the cusp of experiencing the most severe water cuts in its history, the alfalfa industry has been thrown into the heart of long-running disputes about the future of farming in the western United States and sustainable water management. Moving on, alfalfa seems to be teetering on the edge. The stakes have never been higher. The Colorado River, which serves over 40 million people in 7 states and 29 federally recognized tribes in southwest and northern Mexico, is rapidly dwindling. The river's flow has been reduced in recent decades due to decreased snowpack, drought conditions, and higher average temperatures. The Colorado River's 2 largest reservoirs, Lake Mead and Lake Powell, are both on the verge of reaching levels so low that the river will cease to flow entirely, a condition known as a dead pool. "We're on the verge," said Jack Schmidt, professor and director of the Center for Colorado River Studies at Utah State University. The dire situation has cast an unwelcome spotlight on the Imperial Valley's alfalfa industry, which is not only the basin's largest water user, but also one of its most powerful. Farmers have been chastised for the perverse practice of growing a thirsty crop in a drought-stricken region, none of which goes directly to feeding people. How does irrigating alfalfa in July in 120-degree temperatures make any sense? Schmidt elaborated. Trevor Tagg, who runs a 3,000-acre, 1,200-hectare forage crop farm in Imperial Valley, is well aware of the criticism, but finds it frustrating. Because of its dependability, farmers in the Southwest have long preferred alfalfa. The crop has a long shelf life and is in high demand. While alfalfa remains a dominant crop in the Imperial Valley, due to the region's consistent water supply, production acreage in California has decreased significantly over the last 2 decades, partly due to rising water costs. Following that, water is our most precious resource. Some farmers in the Imperial Valley have already begun to preserve water by shifting to less water-intensive crops. Stephen Hawk, a 4th-generation farmer who grows various feed crops and vegetables, opted to reduce the output of alfalfa, his largest crop at the time. He increased vegetable production, including lettuce, onions, carrots, and sugar beets. In addition to conserving water, the decision enabled him to diversify revenue streams and implement ground rotation, both of which help soil health. Today, he believes that forage crops like alfalfa account for less than half of his farm. At the end of the day, we're stewards of the earth and our resources, Hawk added, and our most precious resource is water. There are several farms that are 100% forage, he continued. That will be extremely tough for them to sustain. They won't have enough water to farm all of their acres if there is a drought. According to a 2020 study, agricultural water uses accounts for about 80% of total water use in the Colorado River Basin, with roughly half of that going toward alfalfa hay production. However, producers interviewed by The Guardian stated that all basin residents, not just farmers, should bear a portion of the burden of water conservation. Policymakers have enacted various regulations to reduce domestic water use in recent years, including limiting pool sizes and paying individuals to dig up their lawns. Others, however, claim that local conservation efforts are limited. Next up, we are interconnected in the food supply chain. Environmental groups have also chastised basin growers for exporting a significant percentage of their alfalfa output to countries in the Middle East and Asia, which some have compared to shipping water abroad from some of the country's most water-stressed states. According to USDA data, approximately 20% of alfalfa produced in the West was exported in 2021. Last year, alfalfa exports in the United States reached a record high, owing to increasing demand from China. The top importers are Japan, South Korea, and Saudi Arabia. Farmers in the region, however, contend that producers in the Southwest cannot simply opt out of a global food system that also serves the United States, the world's second-largest agricultural importer behind China. What people don't realize is that we are all interconnected in the food supply chain, whether we like it or not, Tag explained. All these other countries feed cattle, sheep, or fowl on the forage commodities we produce here. We cannot simply starve people because they lack the infrastructure to feed themselves. Farmers and environmentalists generally agree that adjusting to a water-stressed future necessitates a thorough rethinking of the current food system, and that money can be a valuable incentive to assist growers in converting to more water-efficient crops. States have debated plans to compensate farmers for using less water, assisting them in coping with the financial losses associated with reduced productivity. The funding could come from the inflation and climate package signed into law by President Biden in August, which includes $4 billion for Colorado River Basin water conservation efforts. Moving on, in other news, the USAID will spend $500 million to extend high-speed internet to rural America. According to officials, the U.S. Department of Agriculture would deliver more than $500 million in loans and grants to telecommunications carriers to extend high-speed internet in rural communities across 20 states. Through the Reconnect program, the government will spend $360 million in grants and $141 million in loans to help sparsely populated areas in Alaska, Colorado, Kansas, Nebraska, Michigan, Minnesota, Iowa, Missouri, Montana, North Carolina, Oregon, and Tennessee. The investment, the third phase of the department's Reconnect program, paired with extra funds from last year's $1.2 trillion infrastructure package, will significantly link rural populations and companies. According to Vilsack, for the first time, we will have a genuine potential to cover all of America. Essentially, U.S. Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack told reporters on September 22nd, with the third round of the Reconnect initiative and the resources available under the infrastructure law, I believe we've come a long way toward enhancing and raising the level of service. According to a government news release, the agency will also increase financing for rural internet projects under the bipartisan infrastructure law in the coming months. According to the department, more Reconnect prizes will be announced in the following weeks. The Alaska Telephone Company will get $33 million in funding to build a fiber network connecting 211 people and 5 businesses in Haynesboro, the Huna Angoon census area, and Skagway municipality. Finally, USADA issues rules against unfair practices in livestock marketing. During a meeting of his Competitiveness Council on Monday, President Biden presented a new rule that the USDA will implement to address unfair and deceptive practices in livestock marketing. It was the second of 3 guidelines that the USDA issued to strengthen farmers' ability to negotiate with meat processors. According to President Joe Biden, the recently introduced legislation will boost competition in the meat and poultry industries, which are presently controlled by 4 enormous international corporations. The president observed that 4 of them control 80% of the market. market, which allows them to control prices. According to the proposal, which would be available for review and public feedback for 60 days, as a result, they produce more while paying less to ranchers and customers. Additionally, it makes it illegal for producers to retaliate against other producers for legitimate expression and safeguards vulnerable market individuals from receiving unfair treatment based on their race, religion, gender, or sexual orientation. In May, the United States Department of Agriculture, USDA, released a proposal for the first 3 regulations that will change the so-called tournament system, which pits farms against one another for processing money. The United States Department of Agriculture, USDA, is now working on a strategy that will make it simpler for growers to demonstrate unfair processing practices. Well, that marks the end of our video today. We hope you enjoyed it. On your way out, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching.